Well, hey there everybody, welcome back to another video. Hope you're all having a fantastic day. Man, I am finally feeling better. I got like a crazy case of food poisoning, but I'm back in action at last. And we're going to keep going with these little fact videos that I've been doing. We did one on the Les Paul, so if you haven't checked that out, I'll link that up in the cards or in Slate or something like that. And I also did one about Eddie Van Halen's Frankenstrat, so make sure you check out those videos. And today we're talking about the Strat. Now this is a guitar that I started on. There's so many cool little facts that I learned about it that I didn't know before. And we're going to dive onto this one. If you want to throw in some of your own facts, leave a comment down below and just throw in some stuff that maybe I don't hit on. But, here's some facts that you might not know about Strat facts. And if you guys want to, you can check out my free guitar course. It is linked down below. And also, if you haven't yet, hit the subscribe button. Yo, let's hang out some more. I'm going to make more of these videos. Yo. Alright, so the first thing I want to throw out here is the actual name Stratocaster. Now, believe it or not, that is not Leo's idea, and also Telecaster was not Leo's idea. He designed them, came up with them, but the name itself is not one of Leo's creation. It was actually Don Randall, who was the chief of marketing at Fender at the time, and he came up with the name, both Telecaster and Stratocaster, and he did such a cool job because it was basically what was going on. I believe Don was a pilot and just a aviation fan. It was also the space age. All these things were happening. So if you don't know, like Telecaster, it was originally called the Broadcaster. They had to change that name, called it Telecaster because television was becoming very popular. Well, the Stratocaster is actually from the stratosphere, and he just put a caster on it. So you came up with Stratocaster. Was kind of his ode back to the aviation stuff, and just a lot, basically he just took what was happening in the world and he's like, hey, you know what? We'll put this together to make the name. So it wasn't Leo's creation, the name, but talk about an ingenious name. Now, this one I thought was really interesting because I did not know this at all, and it was actually the Fender Headstock. So if you look at the Fender Headstock, it's obviously incredibly iconic. You can see the silhouette of the headstock, and it's a Fender. Outside of that, I think Fender just has, in my opinion, the Strat, probably the most unique sound of any electric guitar. But this is actually a pretty borrowed design. When I was looking into, how they came up with the design for the headstock, it referenced a Bigsby. So this is before Bigsby, the Tremolo that we know. Bigsby made guitars. Maybe they still do. I'm not sure about that. I didn't research that. But back then, they were making guitars. I think they might have been the first ones to make a solid body electric guitar. They made a very small run of them, and it had this style of headstock on it. And it's certainly, if you look at it, I have the picture up here, you can definitely see the inspiration. It was very, I believe Leo said it was like lute-ish, like if you looked at a lot of like violins and all that. And if you look at Bigsby, it had this on here. Merle Travis had a neck made for his acoustic guitar, which had this headstock on it. And I think that was the first time it was like really like getting out there and getting seen. If you look at the headstock, you can see that this Fender headstock is pretty influenced. It was a more, I believe Don Randall said, a more kind of like elegant approach to it. And if you look at it, what's funny is the original Bigsby headstock is much more similar to the 70s Fender's headstock. Then they really look a lot alike because they were kind of oversized. But overall, it's kind of a cool little like, okay, it was inspired by, but still totally its own thing. Now, one of the things that was incredibly unique to a Strat is what we kind of take for granted now. You see it on guitars all the time. But these nice contours, as we call them, like belly cuts and all this, the way that it just made the guitar fit more comfortably. If you've played a Telecaster, a lot of Teles have adapted this to them now. But the original ones were a slab body style, so there were no contours on the body. That's why, if you ever wonder what this says, original contoured body. That's why this was on here, because this was, kind of a big deal. Les Pauls don't have a contoured body. The Telecaster didn't have a contoured body. And, the Strat came out, and the Strat was just this overall, even if you look at the headstock, think about how that original Bigsby headstock was. It was very, I guess aggressive. It had points to it. And the Fender one is very smooth and rounded looking, and that's basically just exactly what the Strat is. It's not pointy, it's very rounded, it's very smooth and comfortable. And if like I said, if you ever wondered what that was, I was asked this, like, what does this even mean down here? And I'm like, well, this is the original contoured body. It was a huge part of the design of this guitar. Now, of course, there are 1,000 Fender facts. We could just deep dive into all of these, and I wanted to throw out one that you know, I always was curious about this. I was like, why in the world, CBS, when they bought Fender, the whole thing was make production cheaper, you know, all these different things they were trying to cut corners on. Why did they make the headstock bigger? I'm like, what's the point? Isn't that more wood? Wouldn't that be more expensive? Well, the actual reasoning behind that bigger headstock, which, as far as I know, Leo did not like because he thought it kind of, it basically threw off the flow of the body. You know, everything was very in tune with each other. That was just so they could make the logo bigger. It was an advertising thing. They were like, you know what, we want that name bigger on there. And that's why if you look on the, you know, the bigger headstocks, the name is humongous on it. And it was basically just a marketing thing. That was the whole reason why they had the bigger headstock on there. Strictly marketing purposes behind it. Now, one thing we should talk about is this tremolo system that Leo came up with. Now, the tremolo system was a huge deal because before you know, it was basically a tremolo system like no other at the time. And if there was one, correct me, but what I found when I was researching this is most tremolo systems before the one that came on a Strat basically moved the strings over a fixed bridge. Like you had the bridge where the strings crossed, you know, the saddles, and then another piece that moved the strings this way. So this stayed still. Well, the Fender bridge was the first one that moved it all together as a unit, you know, because if you look, the strings go through the body. Yeah, they don't go through one piece and then over, you know, kind of like a Les Paul style bridge how it has the two pieces. This was the first one that really, it moved it all together. And I think that was like, you know, one of Leo's like really big like pride and joys was his tremolo system. And obviously now we have Floyd Roses and all that kind of stuff. So I think we take for granted how much stuff we have nowadays. But it was, again, it was another huge thing that just happened. And I mean, what an incredible thing. Think about like the vibrato bars and all that stuff. How much this, you know, the Strat tremolo has influenced all this. And there you guys have it. I think we'll leave it off at that. There's a bunch of different facts, but like I said, there's so many, you know, obviously when you're dealing with Fender and Gibson and Strats and Telecasters and Les Pauls, there's a million facts out there. So maybe this is another one that you guys want a part 2 about. I'll leave that up to you and see if you dig the video. But other than that, I'm going to get on out of here. We're going to get the jam on, so I'm going to throw some drums down and play a little backing track for you. So grab your guitars, and thanks for hanging out. Like I said before, if you haven't hit the subscribe button, I know I try not to ask too much. But if you haven't yet, you know, I'll be making more of these. So let's come back and hang out. So other than that, I'm going to bounce on out of here, guys. Have a great rest of your day. Peace out, homies, and play your guitar.